over at BangTheBook.com, your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. We cover all that over there at the website. Daily NHL picks from Parker Michaels, NBA, college basketball, and NHL situational betting spot articles for me. Those go up every Sunday evening. We've got college basketball previews of the day, NBA previews of the day, Alan Moody, Admir Algic, and myself covering all that stuff for you. We're going to have some stuff here coming up for the XFL. I put up an article on Wednesday. Charles J. is going to cover some XFL for us with some more detailed individual game previews. We've got UFC 247 preview, golf every week from James Mazzola, tennis every week from Big Ten Watto, soccer previews from Admir Algic, NASCAR rolling back around here soon as well. So plenty of stuff going on over at BangTheBook.com. Make sure you check it all out. Make sure you keep it tuned over there. Always something good for you to check out that will hopefully help you with your handicapping process. And everything you read over at BangTheBook.com, well, take it out over to DSI Sportsbook, where you can use that BTB200 promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it, and they, of course, are the sponsor here of Bang the Book Radio. All right, so with that, I'm going to fly solo here, like I said, for the first 25, 30 minutes or so here of the show. I'm going to talk a little bit of Major League Baseball stuff, NBA, college basketball, and NHL. Then we'll chat with Greg Peterson, then we'll send you on your way on into the weekend. But we start in the Major League Baseball world, and we talked a little bit about it on Wednesday's show with Brian Leonard, but that massive Mookie Betts trade, that three-team deal that it was actually being held up a little bit right now. The Red Sox kind of worried about the medicals for Brusdar Graterol, the pitcher that they got from Minnesota in that trade. I think eventually everything goes through. But as we look at Boston here, adjusted season win total over at BetOnline, 85.5, minus 130 on the under. And, you know, I figured Mookie Betts and David Price would probably be about a 3-win adjustment for the Red Sox. Maybe you could say it's kind of 3.5 given the juice that's on that number. But we talked about this on Wednesday with Brian Leonard, and something worth mentioning here once again is that, you know, just because Mookie Betts is a 9 or 10 WAR player doesn't mean he's worth 9 or 10 wins to the Red Sox. That's what his mark is over a replacement player. And, you know, Boston still has a pretty solid team overall. Obviously, the ceiling looks quite a bit different without a guy like Mookie Betts. And you know, the rotation has some question marks too now without David Price. So we'll see how low this thing continues to go. But again, keep in mind that some teams win the offseason, some teams lose the offseason. And there are some very big adjustments that happen as a result out there in the season win total betting market. And right now, we're not getting a whole lot of investment in that market because we've got a lot of college basketball stuff going on. People are more interested in putting their money into the college basketball futures, into daily NBA and NHL betting. They're kind of waiting to see what happens here with the XFL a little bit. And also, too, look, I mean, you bet a season win total. You know this as well as I do in any sports market that's out there. You wait 6 or 8 months for that bet to be graded. So that's money that you don't have liquid. That's money that you don't have in your bankroll to go out and play these things. And a lot of people won't bet season win totals because of that, because they want to be a little bit more liquid and a little bit more fluid with their bankrolls. Now, I can tell you a few things. First of all, get yourself in the mindset or structure your bankroll to be able to play some of these futures propositions, because you're talking about a 162 game sample size in Major League Baseball where you've got some margin for error. You've got some room to fall on the wrong side of variance and still be okay. Some of these teams will come nowhere close to their win total line. Others will be right on it or very, very close. So when you talk about single game betting, it's a higher variance environment. Yeah, you know exactly who's going to pitch and who's going to be in the lineup, and that's great, but it's still a higher variance environment because every team generally wins 60 games and loses 60 games, and you could be on a team that winds up losing one of those games that they shouldn't. So I think the season-long betting market does make a lot of sense with these win totals. I think it makes a lot of sense to be willing to lock that bankroll up a little bit and take some positions on these things if you feel really strongly about them. And to me, there are several that I feel pretty strongly about here early on in my writing process. And, you know, I'll have conclusions for all of these in that season win total guide at bangthebook.com. but there are some that I like. There are some that are already juiced on the sides that I like. And that kind of is what it is. You know, you don't worry so much about closing line value with a bet that lasts 162 games as you would with a one-night standalone type of game. So while I'm getting the guide out a lot earlier than I usually do, if you're not comfortable betting these in mid-February because the season is still over a month away, that's fine. But you're going to get some ideas on what my thoughts are, kind of get some ideas on where I expect the market to sort of go. Then you can kind of go from there. So the Mookie Betts deal, obviously earth-shattering, a big type of move. I like to look at the potential impacts of smaller moves, smaller signings. You know, things like, maybe it's not a smaller move necessarily, but the Reds, they acquire Nick Castellanos. They wind up signing him and opt out after the first year of the deal, but 4 years, $64 million. And, that's a team that may be without Eugenio Suarez early on in the season. He's coming back from shoulder surgery. So Castellanos fills a little bit of an offensive void. Once Suarez gets back, they're that much better. And I just wrote about the Reds today with the first draft of my preview. And you also have to look at what these teams are replacing. And for example, looking specifically at Cincinnati here, they add in a Nick Castellanos. They add in a Mike Moustakas. They add in Shogo Akiyama. And we don't know exactly what Akiyama is going to do coming over from Japan. But based on the guys that got a lot of plate appearances for them last year, he should be an upgrade. Jose Iglesias, third in plate appearances for the Reds last year, 84 WRC plus, which means he was 16% below league average offensively. Nick Senzel, a lot of plate appearances, a 90 weighted runs created plus, 10% below the league average in that department. Castellanos is an upgrade over Yasiel Puig, who was also in that 90 WRC plus range. Jose Peraza played 141 games, 403 plate appearances for this team with a 62 WRC plus. So 38% below league average offensively. He's replaced by Mike Moustakas, who's an above average offensive player. So when I look through the win totals here, I look at all of the potential upgrades, all of the potential downgrades, and I grade them in the aggregate to see if I think that team will exceed these season win total expectations or fall short of them. So it's not just that the Dodgers got Mookie Betts, it's who does Mookie Betts replace on that team? Whose plate appearances does he wind up taking? And it certainly looks like at this point in time with the trade of Jock Peterson to Anaheim, he takes over for Jock Peterson. Well, Jock Peterson was a pretty good hitter against right-handed pitching. He was one of those guys that definitely falls on the platoon side of things. So when you talk about the Dodgers, when you talk about a team that was already going to be exceptional, again, their season win total now 100.5, they were already going to be very, very good. Jock Peterson last year was 27% above league average offensively, hit 36 home runs, was a 3-win player. So is Mookie Betts a better player? Yes. But what is the quantifiable impact of Betts taking over for an above average player? What is the difference of Betts, an elite player, against a very good player in Jock Peterson? That's what I try to figure out here with these season win total write-ups, and also what you should be doing in your preseason research. It's not like, Mookie Betts goes to a team like the Indians where he replaces some guy in the outfield who, is probably doubling as a parking attendant. No, Betts replaces a guy who already was an above average major league player. So what is the tangible impact of that? Well, over a full season, maybe Betts helps you to 2 or 3 more victories. But there's a difference of 6 wins above replacement player. That's not the actual difference that we're going to see. So I think it's a really important distinction to make here when you talk about evaluating transactions in Major League Baseball. You look at something like Anthony Rendon, for example, who's going to be taking over at third base for the Anaheim Angels. Well, what did the Angels do last year at third base? It wasn't Anthony Rendon. It was not a player remotely close to Anthony Rendon. So that's one where the impact is much greater, is a lot more tangible for a team like the Angels and with a player like Anthony Rendon. Last year it was David Fletcher who wound up playing third base, played pretty well. Tommy La Stella was good over at third base also. But now one of those guys transitions over to playing second base. So you upgrade at second base and you upgrade at third base. So Now that you do something like that, or maybe Fletcher even winds up playing the outfield a little bit, maybe Justin Upton isn't able to stay healthy, something like that, you're talking about multi-position upgrades for the Angels. Jock Peterson is an upgrade. Rendon is an upgrade. LaStella or Fletcher playing second base is an upgrade. So again, in the aggregate, you start talking about a lot better of a situation for the Angels. So in terms of evaluating these offseason transactions in Major League Baseball, that's what I'm looking to do. I'm seeing, is it an improvement over what was there, and to what degree? And then subsequently, if a guy that played pretty well now gets moved to another position, a below average player gets moved to the bench or maybe got released or something like that, that's really where you gain all of your value from a Major League Baseball season win total standpoint, along with, of course, looking at an individual player level for guys that, should improve, maybe will regress a little bit. So again, that's the work that I'm doing on the baseball side, and that's work that you can do too. Fangraphs makes it easy. Baseball Reference makes it easy. A lot of phenomenal statistical resources out there for baseball. So if you're not an NBA guy, if you're not a college basketball guy, if you're not an NHL guy, start working on baseball, because I think that season win total market is something that you can take advantage of. I think having a lot of that research, although it didn't help me as much last season as it has in previous seasons, I think having that level of research done can give you a really big leg up. So that's what I'm looking to do with my season win totals. And again, that guide will probably come out, I would say, in its entirety in about 2 weeks' time here. That would be February 21st. I'm hoping to get it out a little bit earlier than that. But I think that, within the next 12 to 14 days, I'm going to have all my win totals posted, going to have a lot of that future stuff posted. So definitely worth your while to keep an eye out for that over at bangthebook.com. But obviously, in the meantime, we've got sports that are going on here. And the NBA, a very, very busy day on Thursday, a flurry of trade activity, a ton of trade activity out there with the NBA trade deadline at 3 o'clock. So many deals, so many guys on the move. D'Angelo Russell and Andrew Wiggins with a change of scenery. The Clippers getting Marcus Morris. They're getting a little bit more depth. The Cavs get Andre Drummond because they're making a lot of different financial decisions and trying to free up some cap space and all that kind of thing. Huge deal between the Heat and the Grizzlies. Then you've also got Minnesota in that deal. Guys like Dion Waiters, Justice Winslow, James Johnson, Andre Iguodala, Solomon Hill, Jay Crowder. A lot of guys that start, a lot of rotation types of players, good sixth men, stuff like that. This weekend in the NBA, I think, is pretty difficult because, even though we talked about it on Thursday with John Ryan, there are some teams that did get a lot better. It still takes a little bit of time when you only have 5 guys out there on the floor at the same time to get everybody to gel, to get everybody on the same page, to get everybody acclimated. And again, keep in mind here too, when you talk about trade deadlines, these guys are human. They're moving families, they're moving kids, they're moving away from people, they're moving away from friends, maybe longtime teammates, stuff like that. It takes a little bit of time. Yeah, we say it's a business, and the players always say, well, it's just part of the business, this and that. It is. It definitely is. But again, these guys are still human, and we do have to sort of wonder, how they're going to handle some of these different situations. But as far as some situational spots that, I had my eye on this week going into the trade deadline and looking at the week as a whole, you have an obvious spot here, Portland and Utah. Portland's been absolutely excellent here of late. At least Damian Lillard has played very, very well, but Portland's in a tough spot. They play tonight against the San Antonio Spurs. Very, very big game or not tonight, but on Thursday night, recording this on Thursday night, by the way. Portland and San Antonio, those two teams are right next to each other in the Western Conference standings. And Portland trying to make up some ground here. As we know, they got off to a very, very difficult start, but they play in Utah coming up on Friday night. And they just played in Denver. So this is kind of like a interrupted altitude double. I think that's kind of a difficult spot to be in. And also you've got Utah looking for some revenge, lost by 17 earlier this week against Portland. So Utah's looking for revenge. Portland in a bad back-to-back. And yeah, generally speaking, a lot of those spots do wind up getting priced into the number, but sometimes not enough. Sometimes not to sometimes not to the correct degree. So that may be one of those spots with Utah and Portland. You've got a rapid revenge angle. You've got a back-to-back angle. You've got Portland really living on what Damian Lillard has been able to do for them. And that's tough. We talked about that on Thursday with John Ryan about the teams that do really well that have a lot of double-digit scorers. If you're very dependent on a couple of players and they're off, that makes it very difficult for you. And they could very well be off in a back-to-back with travel in a bit of a difficult spot. So Utah definitely on my radar here for Friday night. Another interesting one here on Saturday, the Brooklyn Nets and the Toronto Raptors. Obviously, the Brooklyn Nets, they've had their fair share of problems here throughout the course of the season. They've had some injuries. They just haven't been overly cohesive, but they're starting to get some guys back. They're still, firmly entrenched in that playoff picture right now with the 7 seed. They take on Toronto. And it's always interesting to me when you've got a team that goes on the road and they get to sit and wait it out on Friday night while the team that they're playing has to fly back in from a back-to-back. That's Toronto on Saturday night. They play the Pacers on Friday. Then the Nets, who, again, have had some time to kind of sit around. These two teams do play again on Wednesday, this time in Brooklyn. But, for the Nets here, maybe they go out. Maybe they party a little bit too much in Toronto. That's certainly a possibility. But they're in their hotel rooms on Friday night waiting on Toronto. Toronto, meanwhile, playing a game, traveling back in. You go back home, the kids wake you up early Saturday morning, or you got to run some kind of errand or something like that. You're not exactly fully focused on that game. Brooklyn, on the other hand, is. They're already in town. They're away from their families. They're not worried about it. They FaceTime. They go to bed. They get up. They have lunch. They maybe do a shoot around or something like that. They go play the game. I think those are spots that really do benefit the road teams. So I do like Brooklyn a little bit in that matchup there on Saturday night against Toronto. One other one in the NBA for this week, and that is on Sunday here. The Clippers and the Cavaliers. The Clippers will not play their full roster. They're in a back-to-back. Kawhi won't play, especially against the very pathetic Cavs. The Clippers next week play Philadelphia and Boston going into the All-Star break. Now, we talked about this on Wednesday with Brian Leonard that, the Cavaliers, when they play teams that they can beat, they don't really show up. When they play teams that they can't beat, they show up, they cover the number, they kind of hang around, they sort of save face a little bit. What happens in this spot where they take on a Clippers team that, won't be playing everybody? And Los Angeles will still be a very clear, very big favorite on the road in this game. But does the fact that the Clippers aren't playing their full complement of players keep the Cavaliers from being invested in this game? I think that's a possibility. And again, keep in mind here too that, when you're on a really good team and you're a bench player, you're a part-time type of guy, and you get a chance in that spotlight, I think that means something to you. I think you want to go out there and either prove yourself for more minutes or get into a better situation next year, maybe get a new free agent contract where you can start for somebody. I think the Clippers are in a good spot here on Sunday. Again, obviously back-to-back, they're going to have some guys that don't play, but because of the situation, because of what we've seen from the Cavaliers here, the Clippers can walk through this game and still cover the number. But I think motivated guys coming off the bench, playing a bigger role, I got something that does keep Los Angeles a little bit more focused here in this one. So I do like them a little bit here in that game on Sunday. Transitioning over to the college basketball side of things here, a lot of games in my situational article for Saturday. A lot of really interesting games too, kind of ranging from the major conferences to the smaller conferences a little bit. I'm going to start with this one because I think this is one of my favorite spots of the week here. Towson and Drexel in the CAA. We talked a lot about the CAA in the situational betting article. I wrote up a William & Mary and Charleston preview on Thursday. But Towson and Drexel. Towson is in a very bad spot here. One of my favorite situational plays of the week. Towson plays Thursday night against Delaware. Now they turn around, play 2 o'clock Eastern time in Philadelphia against the Dragons. Towson just played William & Mary, UNC Wilmington, who we've talked about on our segments with Kyle Hunter. They changed coaches. They've been a lot more engaged, a lot more focused, a lot more energized here of late. And then Towson also just played College of Charleston. So you play William & Mary, a very good team, College of Charleston, a very good team, and now you're in a little bit of a tricky travel spot against a Drexel team that's not great. They're not bad. They're not terrible. they're kind of middle of the road here in the CAA. You've got a really tough spot here, I think. I think this is one of those situations where Towson's probably a road favorite or a pick'em type situation. And this is something you can look at in these low major conferences. A lot of times these teams aren't very deep. So if you play a lot of close, emotional games against teams, and then all of a sudden you play a little bit of a flat spot, a little bit of a letdown spot, something like that, and that's what I think this is for Towson, I think you can find some really good values, some really good opportunities. So I like Drexel on Saturday in the CAA. I think they'll be getting, maybe a point or two at home or a pick'em situation, something like that. I do like the Dragons here on Saturday. Another one I like, this one from, I guess we could call the MAC a mid-major conference, but Toledo is on the road at Bowling Green. And Bowling Green has been very, very good this season in the MAC. They had, a historic winning streak. I think they won about 8 or 9 in a row. Longest winning streak for them in conference play in about 50 years. One of the games in that span that Bowling Green won was against Toledo. Bowling Green is coming off of a loss here, so that's a little bit concerning, losing on the road at Central Michigan. But Toledo wants revenge. That win for Bowling Green up in Toledo on January 25th, the first time that the Falcons have beaten the Rockets since 2011 in Toledo. First win over Toledo overall since 2017. So the Rockets are out for revenge here. And, even though they've fallen off the pace a little bit, even though Bowling Green is the better team here in the MAC this season, Toledo 3-7 in conference play. They need this game. They really need to start picking things up a little bit here in the back portion of conference play. And you've got this revenge factor. They lost that first game by 6 at home. They didn't really do a whole lot in the second half of that one. I think this is a bounce back spot for them in a rivalry game. Bowling Green, with how they've played of late, will be laying a little bit of a decent number in this one. I like Toledo a lot to get that bounce back victory here over Bowling Green on Saturday. You've got Austin Peay and Belmont. This is a spot I talked about the first time around. Belmont played at Murray State and then played at Austin Peay. They lost both of those games. Now this week, Belmont, and I don't know the result of the game against Murray State because I'm recording here on Thursday evening, but Belmont hosted Murray State on Thursday, now gets this revenge spot against Austin Peay at home. And generally speaking, Belmont's been the top dog in this conference. They've kind of gone head-to-head with Murray State for that distinction. There have been times where those teams have been talked about as possibly being worthy of at-large consideration. But Belmont has been that team here in the OVC. And Austin Peay is just kind of getting to that point here over the last couple of years. So I think this is a good spot for Belmont, win or lose on Thursday, to exact revenge. They're going to want it after losing that first game. I think they're going to be really focused on this one. That's one where I definitely take a look here at the home team in Belmont. How about another small conference game here? Radford and High Point. Now, High Point is not a very good team, but as I wrote about in my situational article, situational spots can be equalizers. They can level the playing field a little bit. Radford plays Winthrop on Monday, and those are the two best teams here in this Big South Conference. Radford lost at home in the first game to Winthrop 61-56. They've had this revenge spot circled against Winthrop since that first game. And again, when you talk about these low major conferences where there's one bid up for grabs, these marquee matchups really mean a lot. High Point lost by 11 at Radford in the first meeting. I don't think Radford is fully invested in this game. They've got that revenge game on deck against Winthrop, a game that they want with the way that this conference tournament is set up. It's one of those where home court advantage goes to the team with the better conference record. So you want to try and tie up that tiebreaker. You want to give yourself a really good spot to try and play the key games in this conference tournament at home. So that's a big one for Radford. I don't think they lose to High Point necessarily, but I don't know if they're fully invested here either. So I think High Point at home against a team that were competitive against the first time around, I think that's a pretty good look here for High Point down in the Big South Conference. Here's another one I'm kind of looking at here, another low major type of game. Montana and Idaho from the Big Sky Conference. There's a couple of big rivalries here in this league, and maybe Montana against Eastern Washington has kind of become the premier rivalry because the Eagles have gotten better. But Montana and Weber State, Those two teams do not like each other. They used to fight for that conference crown more often than not. Montana plays Idaho here on Saturday. They're going to be laying a big road number. Idaho is a very, very bad team. The game on deck for Montana is against Weber State. And that is a circled matchup for you. Again, you've got to keep in mind, we think about Duke versus North Carolina, Ohio State versus Michigan, Michigan and Michigan State, who do play on Saturday. We think about these big rivalries in college basketball. We don't think about the low rivalries. The ones that really matter to these schools, really matter to these teams. Montana has Weber State. You think they're going to want to go out there and embarrass Idaho by a big margin? Maybe. But I think Idaho's got a puncher's chance here getting a big number at home in a game where I don't think Montana is going to be all that invested, all that interested in going out there and winning by margin. So I think there are a lot of games here on Saturday. Again, you can check out my situational article over at BangTheBook.com. But I think there are a lot of games here on Saturday that really, really do mean something. Couple of games on Sunday as well. Butler and Marquette. I'm going to take Marquette in that game. Butler back out on the road off that big Villanova win. Marquette nearly beat Butler at Hinkle Fieldhouse in the previous meeting. They lost that game in overtime. I do it Marquette a little bit on Sunday. But again, try to find these spots. Try to find these equalizers. They are something that can be really impactful for you over the course of the college basketball season. Finally, we'll finish up on the NHL side for my solo segment. Then we'll get back to college hoops with Greg Peterson in the next segment. But on Saturday, a lot of games in the NHL. We don't have any great situational spots like we did in previous weeks where, especially last week coming off the bye where, that was just a gold mine for us. But there are some pretty good games to take a look at here on Saturday. One of them is Arizona at Boston. We talked about this on Tuesday with Brian Blessing that you fade teams in that first game back off of a long road trip, and you buy teams starting a road trip. Arizona, one of them here, they're playing 4 in 6 days, but they start with this day game against Boston. And I have to think that Arizona, probably going to be getting a pretty good price here, maybe in the plus 150, plus 160 range, something like that. It's a day game. It's a long way from home. The markets will price that in accordingly. But I think Arizona is going to be very invested to get off to a good start here in this game because they haven't played well of late. They didn't play well going into the All-Star break. They haven't played well coming out of the All-Star break. I think they put a lot of eggs in this basket here. And if we get a big enough underdog number, it's worth a shot or maybe a first period shot, something like that, to where Arizona probably going to come out very, very motivated against a Boston team that they play a lot of big conference games. They play Tampa Bay and Toronto and Washington and Pittsburgh. Those are the games that really get them going. Is this one against Arizona, the midday matinee game? They're going to be fully invested in this one? I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be the case. So Arizona's one on Saturday that kind of intrigues me with a day game here. Also, Dallas and St. Louis is a pretty interesting one. A little bit concerned about the price tag for this game because St. Louis has been playing so well throughout the year. But, Dallas, second or third place team there in the Central Division. They're kind of trying to catch up to the Blues. And Dallas has had a difficult season. They started out with some problems scoring goals. Then their coach had to resign. Then they had to start playing for a new guy. It's been a little bit of a tough year for them. But this is a 4-6 for Dallas off of a couple of back-to-backs. They play Minnesota on Friday night. The Blues, a lot of road games. They hosted the All-Star game. A lot of difficult spots for them here of late. But now they're back at home, settled back in a little bit. I think this is a good spot for the Blues. Again, I'm a little bit worried about the price tag for this one. But Arizona and St. Louis, a couple of the plays I do like here on Saturday. As we look ahead to Sunday here, Anaheim and Buffalo is kind of an interesting game. This is a 3 o'clock Eastern time puck drop here. It's a 4-6 for Anaheim, really more of a 4 and 5.5 with that afternoon start time. Same thing for the Sabres here, but they've spent most of the week at home. This is a good spot for Buffalo. And Buffalo's had a lot of good spots of late, but there are problems with this team. The players, once again, not getting along with management, not getting along with the coaching staff. There's a big disconnect here, again, with the Sabres. And this happened the last couple of years. They make the coaching change. Things still don't seem to be a whole hell of a lot better for Buffalo. So even though they're getting some good spots here, they haven't played well in them. And this one worries me too. And again, you look at this from kind of a broad spectrum picture, looking way ahead as I do, writing this article, Friday or Saturday for the following week. You kind of try to look at these spots from a long range standpoint. And once you get to the game, maybe they don't always line up. And to me, I think that's one here with Buffalo where it looks like they're in a very good spot against a West Coast team playing a 4-6 in early start time. But you still have to be able to trust the team that you want to back. And I think Buffalo right now, just not a team that I want to trust. So a cautionary tale to wrap up this portion of the show here. But again, great situational spots always written about over at bangthebook.com in those 3 articles.